and me. Thank you so much. For the last month or so, and this is because I feel this is very important, and so far nobody has contradicted the matters I've raised, barring the chair of Uganda Human Rights Commission asking my source of information. So as we speak today on the 5th of August 2026, I want to raise an issue which in my view represents one of the greatest human rights and development and nation building challenges facing the people of Uganda. Approximately 26% of Ugandan children under the age of 5, about 2 million in all, are stunted. This is not merely children who are shorter than expected. Stunting permanently affects brain development. It affects learning ability. It affects physical growth. It affects educational attainment. It affects productivity, and it affects lifetime opportunities. Much of these are irreversible. And these are the children who form part of Uganda's future. Within the next 4 or 5 election cycles, they will become part of the workers, the farmers, the teachers, the entrepreneurs, the doctors, the engineers, members of parliament, presidents or presidential candidates, and voters. The quality of Uganda's future is therefore being determined today by the quality of nutrition we give to the youngest of our citizens. The first question we must ask is not simply how do we reduce the numbers. We must ask why are these children first stunted and where exactly are these children? The national figure is that Uganda consumes approximately 63 to 70 liters of milk per person per year. Although this does not cover the proper national average, I will name the top 3 of the national average of 63 to 70 liters per person per year, and milk being the main avenue for delivering protein for the very young. In enkola, the average is between 160 to 170 liters per person per year. It's between 130 to 140 liters per person per year. In central Uganda, it is between 80 to 90 liters per year. But now let me come to the bottom of this distribution of milk, which gives you an idea of where the nutritional deficits are. In Teso, which was once the leading area of cattle in Uganda, today we have 35 to 45 liters per person per year. In Acholi, it is 25 to 35 liters per person per year. In Lango, it is 16 to 20 liters per person per year. The reason why those 2 million children are not distributed equally across the country. There are places where they are more concentrated, and it mirrors the aspect of the amount of milk consumption per person per year. So these disparities don't only respect milk consumption, but they also respect the child's nutrition, anemia, and stunting. The question therefore becomes, why should the opportunity available to a Ugandan child depend heavily on where they were born? The children do not create these disparities, the children merely inherit them. The regions with the lowest milk consumption today are largely the same regions which suffered the greatest destruction in their productive livestock economy in the late 80s. Cattle were not merely wealth. They were the productive foundation for rural life. They provided milk for the children every day. They generated household income. They paid school fees. They financed medical care. They provided draft oxen for cultivation. They sold fertility through manure. They were productive capital upon which communities depended, entire communities depended. When the cattle disappeared, communities lost much more than animals. They lost nutrition, they lost productive capacity, they lost food security, they lost income, and they lost the foundation upon which generations could be raised. And the consequences of what happened in the late 80s is what we're feeling today with this child stunting and child malnutrition, which is affecting particular regions or particular communities more than others. This agony of the late 80s has been passed from generation to generation. The generation today are paying a price for something which they are totally not aware of. In the new vision of 27th June 1989, President Yoweri Museveni responded to questions concerning the destruction of houses and granaries during the military operations. He said, in the few remaining areas, there isn't any food anymore. So there's nothing left, nothing more to destroy. The President saying in an area where military operations are taking place, there is no more food to destroy. Milton Obote, drawing attention to the significance of that statement in his writing of Notes on Concealment of Genocide in Uganda, asked Ugandans to reflect on what it meant to communities to reach a point where literally there was nothing more to destroy. In the same period, President Museveni acknowledged that approximately 2.7 million Ugandans in northern and northeastern Uganda had been rendered destitute because of the conflict. This is the period where we had people in these internally displaced camps who had lost everything. But the Rehabilitation and Development Plan which NRM introduced, or which they plagiarized from UPC, contains certain elements which defeat the logic. Because in that development plan, there was talk of restoring, let me quote it properly. Recognize that rebuilding Uganda's life veterinary services, controlling livestock diseases, and rehabilitating deep tanks. It recalls that materials for repairing 214 deep tanks had already arrived in the country, and district deep repair teams had been re-equipped and rehabilitation work had begun. So in the late 80s, following from the UPC program, there was work towards restoring this cattle economy, which completely disappeared. I, through the Jimmy Akena Foundation, have undertaken to be repairing deep tanks in many of these areas, because the deep tank provides a key element whereby you can deal with the cattle diseases and be able to restore that economy. A lot of this logic was based on a book I read way back by somebody called Charles Swindoll about the restoration of Jerusalem after the exile in Babylon, and it's based on the book of Nehemiah. The book is entitled Hand Me Another Brick. In my case, show me another deep tank. Because I am not ready to wait for government to repair something which is vitally important. I cannot repair all the deep tanks. I cannot take the role of government. But every deep tank which I can repair will be a source whereby we can help maintain at least some families and the like. For me, it began with repairing our own deep tank in Akokoro, which stopped working in 1987 when our animals were raided, and my paternal grandfather, i.e. the father of my father, Stanley Opeto, was murdered in August of 1987. Next week will be the 39th anniversary from his death and the loss of the animals. I raise this not out of anger or malice, because in my case I first had to come to terms and to forgive. I repaired or I worked on the graves of my grandfather and others who we lost in that period. But one important thing I need to note here is that I had a special guest who actually ended up taking being the photographer, and this was none other than Jaffa Amin. I raise this on the basis that we're dealing with questions of reconciliation and looking at a greater future. How did Jaffa end up in Akokoro on that particular day was brought about because of the work of Ambassador Olaro Tunu and the former Chief Justice Owindolo. Earlier on, we had a gathering in Koboko where we brought together the communities of Lamo, of Acholi and West Nile as we sought reconciliation and peace. So in that October of last year, Jaffa Amin was my special guest in Akokoro as I honored those who had passed while we were away. But this is all part of the question of building a future which we can all stand for. Dr. Lara Tunu, together with Chief Justice Owindolo, for fostering the unity of our peoples. And it's on that basis that I continue to raise this alarm. Of the 2 million Ugandan children, the highest concentration are in our regions. Lamu is at the bottom of the whole of Uganda on milk consumption per capita. It is closely followed by Tesu. Then it is followed by Acholi. Then Busoga, unfortunately, also finds itself in the mix. On top of that, you have West Nile. But all of this milk consumption is pointing towards we are not catering for the next generation of Uganda. It's a problem, and this is not a problem which started now. I am tracing its roots to the late 80s, where we had statements that food was destroyed. Today we have the consequence. 2 million Ugandan children under the age of 5 are stunted, particularly in the regions which lost everything. There's been talk of restocking. We keep going around restocking. As UPC, we have presented ideas which can work for these people of Uganda, which can work for the people of Lamu, work for the people of Acholi, work for the people of West Nile, of Karamoja, who are now starving today. Until we're able to have an honest conversation, until we're able to address the difficulties which we face as a community, that is the only way we're going to be able to resolve some of the underlying issues. So the question of hunger, the question of starving children is a much bigger issue. And as Jimmy Akena, Uganda People's Congress, we are not prepared to let it go. Our future depends on the children. If we cannot raise a next generation of children who can be productive, who can be able to carry the dreams forward, a failure. So even if it costs me everything I've worked for, I'm prepared to continue to speak. Because the question of hunger is not an agricultural issue, it's not just an agricultural issue. It's not a livestock issue. It's not a food issue, it's not an education issue. It's not an economic issue alone. It is a combination of all of these things together. And I cannot stand here and pretend that everything is well in Uganda, yet our future is being eroded when our children are dying. Our children are being denied opportunities to be able to succeed. That's not a Uganda I live for. Milton Obote used to talk of UPC as an insurance. Look at it as an insurance company, that whatever has gone wrong in Uganda, UPC can come up with ideas on how we can repair, how we can make it right. But it falls upon us to make it right for the next generation. Government has admitted several times that yes, they need to restore. But what has happened? Year in, year out. The consequences today, we see normally when I raise this issue of the standard children, people look at primary school. And yes, primary school, it is equally affected. But even before these children enter P1, before we hand them over to UNATU, they are already stunted. They're already on a back foot. They already are not going to have an opportunity compared to other kids around the world. And the strange thing about it, South Sudan, you know the average milk consumption in South Sudan? 239 liters, more than Uganda. Is that not embarrassing? It is terribly embarrassing. But we need to organize ourselves. South Sudan have extra milk, but they lack protein. They lack an agricultural economy. Our economy, that's part of the question of integration. If you look around the region, you look at Ethiopia, Ethiopia has excess animals. Uganda has excess production in areas where we can be able to thrive. And that's the Uganda I want to build. So, as Jimmy Akena, as UPC, we're going to continue to challenge these questions. We're going to continue to fight for to seeing how the campaign for the Secretary General of the United Nations unfolds, but I'll not relent in speaking the truth on the problems which we face as a country. Some of these issues we're going to raise in the High Court Summit because the honest truth, the elections which we had have been a shame. I congratulate the UPC members who participated in this election, the UPC members who were elected, but even the LC1 election, we could not do it honestly. The rigging. Why? General election a mess. Even LC1 you cannot do things properly. Why? What is the future of Uganda? What are we trying to prove to ourselves? That we cannot do something right? No. In IPOD we will discuss it. But for people who say they went to the bush because the elections were rigged, and then you give us this nonsense and equality elections, it can't work. Democracy has certain rules, certain expectations. Ugandans are being treated to comical aspects of election. People deciding elsewhere who should be leaders. That's not democracy. Democracy depends on the people having a right to choose their own leaders and the parties being able to fill the leaders without interference. So I congratulate those who succeeded, but this election of LC1 falls together with the other elections as a farcical use of a good process to undermine for, I would say, parochial advantage, but not for the advantage of the people of Uganda. I say all this for God of my country. A story in 2015. I will start the story in 2010. In 2010, I offered myself for the leadership of Uganda People's Congress. I think there were 7 of us who stood for that election. One of the candidates was Dr. Laura Tuno, and I lost that election in Nambole. In my concession speech, I conceded that I lost the election, and I mentioned that I'm going to go to the grassroots and mobilize. And 5 years later, I'll be back. 5 years later, I contested for the leadership of the party because I had a vision where I thought the party should go. In the 2015 election, there was a bit of division in the party. Some were for TDA go forward, others were trying to keep our identity. So we had our own contradictions. But that does not change the whole nature of what it is that we were aiming at as a political party. So in 2015, I contested for the leadership of the party, and then I also contested for a member of parliament. 2020, I contested again for the leadership of the party, and then I contested for a member of parliament. And this is all to bring the party to the position where we can actually determine the future of Uganda. There's something which your colleague raised some time ago as 2015, what was different? Why am I more vocal in 2026 than I was in 2015? You see, in 2015, we were playing a defensive game. At that time, we were fighting not to be wiped off the political map. Although it has been said, and it's been said recently, that by this time there will be no political parties, that war has been going on quietly below the scenes. So 2015, I had to struggle, make sure UPC has representation in Parliament. 2021, UPC has representation in Parliament. 2026, UPC has representation in Parliament. But 2026, we had moved beyond just representation in Parliament. We have now moved to a position whereby we can play a significant role in the national politics. That is what brought us out. And what brings us out in the national politics is an agenda which works for the people of Uganda. And not just talk about things in the open. People were challenging me. I can say 2 million Ugandan children are starving. It's actually a testament on Ugandan politics that a politician can stand up and say a lie to that magnitude. Where somebody can question me to say, what is your source of information? I cannot, by the life of me, stand up on the national program, a national platform, and say such a lie of humongous proportions. 2 million Ugandan children are malnourished. It has to be fact. It has to be verified. And I don't raise issues if I don't have a solution. If I don't have a solution, I'll be lamenting. I'll just be merely lamenting. And I'm not in politics for lamenting. UPC is not really in politics for lamenting. That's why I said, according to Milton Body, UPC must be considered like this massive insurance company. That where things went wrong, UPC can come and make it right. That's why we're in politics. That's why we're standing up. That's why we're speaking on these issues. Because we have an idea, we have a plan, we have an objective on how we can change or make people's lives better. So, it has not changed. My agenda for the leadership of UPC had nothing to do per se with Dr. Laro Tunu. Dr. Laro Tunu even said he's not contesting in 2016. He had said he's not contesting. He was not part of the candidates. There were other candidates who stood. There are things I've been faulted for, but you will not fault me for standing before the delegates. I stood before the delegates in Uma showgrounds. I made my pledge to the delegates in Uma showgrounds. I stood before the delegates at Kasangati during COVID, but we had a quorum of delegates. I spoke there to the delegates. In leading to 2026, when things went wrong, we had a delegates conference online. But now where we have reached as a party, I had not planned to do this one now today, but I can give you a preempt of this issue. We are going for a delegates conference, and in that delegates conference, I want every UPC member who has a heart for UPC to be there. Anyone who claims leadership of UPC to be there, but you must have a heart for UPC. You must be there for UPC, and let us discuss, form a way forward, and organize the party that the party can offer leadership to this country, especially in this trying time. And that one is not going to be more than 2 months down the road. We're going to a delegates conference. We're going to discuss how we're going to sort out the party. And then we're also going to go for an internal party election. So whoever wants to be president of UPC, you get yourself ready. Get yourself ready. Don't just be making noise there. Get yourself ready and speak to the UPC members. The UPC members are the ones who are going to determine. It's not Jimmy Akena, it is not the media, and it's not these other people who think they can interfere in other political parties. They should keep away. Let UPC organize this house, and we meet in the playing field. If you think you're the best, we'll see. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Joseph Kavala Martin of Uganda.
This biblical thing where they talk about that. If your child asks for a loaf of bread, will you give him a snake? But if your child asks for a glass of milk and you don't have it, what will you do as a man? What will you do? Your child is asking just for a glass of milk, a cup of milk, and you don't have it. Can you really stand up in the front of men and say that you're also a man? It destroys people, it destroys their dignity. And this is before we send them to the school, where we've also mistreated the teachers who are supposed to inspire them that they'll be productive students or productive people in Uganda. So this is a big crisis. And if people won't want to listen, I'll still make noise until they listen, because our children are dying, and once we injure them in this way for the rest of their life, they will never be able to reach their full potential. And for me, I want Uganda to reach its full potential. And when it does, we'll have an effect on all our neighbors, positively, not just in war. Yes. I started with our own dip in Akokoro. That one, as I mentioned, ceased to work in 1987 August when our animals were raided and my paternal grandfather was killed. I fixed another one in a Lepton, that is in Lepton district. And then I fixed one in Muchwini, Kitgum district. I have assessed several others, but I ran into the difficulty of the chemicals, reliability of the chemicals and the veracity. In the dip tank in Akokoro, we have dipped the animals, but the ticks are looking at you as if you've done nothing. We collected a sample, took it to Entebbe where they have the laboratory. We're waiting for the feedback on this thing. And that's the concern which I'm raising. In Uganda, we have to control the use of these chemicals. We have to control the use of medicines. We don't seem to have control of this. I worked in that industry. In other places, you cannot just walk in and buy things left, right, and center. You use specific drugs in specific areas and according to specific measurements. So it's a much bigger issue, but I'll do my part. If it's not enough, others will come and do more. But I'm not going to wait for government suddenly to wake up after 40 years of neglect to start understanding and do something. I won't wait. They'll find me as part of the solution. I'm not part of the problem, I want to be part of the solution. Yes. I have concentrated on the youngest and most vulnerable. Most of my focus for the last month has been those below 5. When you come to primary going age, there is a big crisis. Those who cannot feed them at home can also not send the children to school with lunch. So kids go to school, spend the whole day hungry, and hunger is not the best catalyst for learning and for absorbing information. But this goes further. The new vision in recent days mentioned that 97% of university students are underfeeding. 97 underfeeding. New vision, not Jimmy Akena. So from the very beginning, below 5, when they're at home, we starve them, we malnourish them. They go to primary school, we continue to starve them. Secondary, we starve them, up to university, and then we want to compete in this world. And yet we're blessed. There is no country blessed like Uganda, believe me, we are blessed. Our motto, blessed by nature. Yes, we're blessed by nature. But we're not using nature the way nature should be used in order to create an advantage for our children in this world. And whatever happens, I will do my part. I'll speak my truth. However uncomfortable people will get, I will speak that truth. Because the children of Uganda deserve a better future. As of Uganda, we deserve a better future. So I'm not going to maintain only speaking on the political issues because there are serious human rights questions there. But I'm deepening it to the issue of the future of Uganda, which is in its people and mainly in its children. I say all of this for God and my country.